All right, everyone. Welcome. Jared here. And tonight, you notice Dave got a little more handsome. Uh, this is our rep elect, Tim Jimenez for here in Tooele. For you guys who haven't followed politics or don't know who he is, he'll be your representative come October, and he'll represent us proudly. And after we're done with Mr. McCloskey, we will give Tim a minute to, if he wants to put out any information for any of the listeners who would like to get a hold of him or anything else. But without further ado, we've got Mark McCloskey on. You guys may remember him from NBC and CNN fame. I'm just going to put it in my words. Mark defended his property from a mob, and he got pilloried in the media for it. And his state seemed to have pilloried him about it. But now Mark is running for office in the great state of Missouri. And so, Mark, go ahead and take it away. Tell us, where you live, kind of your background, and then tell us about your run for office.
Okay. Well, my name is Mark McCloskey. I live in the city of St. Louis. I've got a house in the actual city of St. Louis, the murder capital of the world. And I've got a farm that's about 45 miles west of St. Louis in Franklin County, Missouri, which is where I vote in the civilized part of the world. But I'm 65 years old. I've been a lawyer for the last 37 years. Been married to my wife, Patty, for the same 37 years. We've got one adult daughter that lives in the People's Republic of Chicago. And, I've been a lifelong Republican, staunch anti-communist. My dad was a big anti-communist and a member of the John Birch Society. My mom was a president of what was called in those days the West County Republican Women's Club that got a Republican elected in the 2nd District of Missouri for the first time in a long time. It's been a Republican district ever since. I didn't go to college after high school. I liked to work. I went to work on the riverfront of St. Louis when I was 15. I was a deckhand on a riverboat when I was 16, engineer on a riverboat when I was 17. By the time I was 18, I was a chief engineer covering 3 boats on the waterfront in St. Louis. And then eventually I decided that I needed to go to college, and I went to school. I did real well in college. I got 3 degrees in 3 years. I had the highest average of anybody applying to SMU Law School that year, so they gave me my law school education for free. And I've never thought about being a politician. Still not a politician. Never thought about running for any kind of office until very recently. It was actually about a year and 2 weeks ago. But times have changed, and we'll get into it in more detail. But when the Antifa mob attacked our house, broke down our gate, charged my house, and threatened to kill me and rape and murder my wife, and burn down the house, kill my dog, and burn down my office building, and all sorts of other mean, nasty things, it set us on a new path. And we started campaigning for President Trump, and we campaigned all over the country for the president. We did 2 tours through Texas. We were down there with Colonel Allen West, and we campaigned in Oklahoma and Missouri and Kansas, and 2 tours through Pennsylvania because it was supposed to be the key to the election. And for a while, Patty and I were the Team Trump bus in Pennsylvania, doing 7 organized rallies a day as surrogates for the president, and just basically spreading the word. And it's pretty easy to campaign for President Trump, considering that we had the best economy in the history of the country and the lowest unemployment rates in all demographics, and energy independence, and a secure border, and about everything you could want. And yet you could see the path that the country was headed on. And what I said every time I got off that bus was that if we don't win this election cycle, the Democrats take over, we'll lose this republic, that we'll lose our First Amendment, we'll lose the Second Amendment. They'll pack the Supreme Court to where no unconstitutional provision will ever be held unconstitutional again. They'll seek DC and Puerto Rican statehood to have a permanent control of the Senate, and our country would be over. And then when the Trump campaign was over, Patty and I just kept doing the same things on our own that we've been doing for the president, putting on presentations at the state capitol on our God-given rights and on the Constitution. And people started to like what we had to say, and we got invited to various local Lincoln Day dinners in Missouri here. All the county Republican parties have what are called Lincoln or Lincoln Reagan Day dinners, their annual banquet. And we got invited to those and started speaking at them, and people liked what we had to say. And then when Roy Blunt, our senior senator, wisely decided not to run for election, people started asking me if I had an interest in doing it. And I initially, was ambivalent at best. I'm 65 years old, didn't necessarily want to go subject myself to being surrounded by swamp creatures at this point in my life. But we felt that it was a path that God had placed in front of us, and we needed to do it. And so I had a buddy of mine that lives in my neighborhood who used to be in the Reagan administration. I called him up and I said, "What do you think about the concept of me running for U.S. Senate?" He said, "Well, just go outside, drive some nails through your feet. It'll feel better and it won't take as long." Sage advice, which I unfortunately chose not to follow. So, I announced my candidacy on Tucker Carlson's show on May the 18th of last year, and we've just been doing nothing but since. I mean, we got a vehicle for the campaign. It turned 93,000 miles yesterday. And so we've been, we used to think Missouri is a big state when we first started traveling across the state. But, now every time we go out on the road, we say, well, we ate there. We bought gas there. I know him. It's just like we've been to 114 counties in the state of Missouri, and we've been to all of them.
That's okay. I got to go for the funny. So you mentioned campaigning for Trump. How do you think the people campaigning, or the people who would end up campaigning for Biden, are feeling right now with him saying, "I'm going to run"? Because they've got to be praying he doesn't. That sounds like an awful job to try to sell him to people that have already felt the bite of his presidency.
Well, my dad was a sports car guy, and he liked to drive, and he thought by the time he was 90 years old, he still thought he was 20 and could go out there and tear up the road. And eventually people had to say, nope, time to take the keys away, right? And I think it's time to take the keys away from Joe Biden.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how do you campaign for a guy who has to be directed by the Easter Bunny, or has to have a note card in his pocket that says, go into the room, say hi, find your seat, sit your ass down, and don't cause any trouble?
He's become a meme.
I used to start all my speeches with a Joe Biden joke. Before I get up on the stage, I'd prepare this note and I'd stick it in one of my inside jacket pockets. And I'd get up there and I'd say, my people, they give me notes so that I know what I'm supposed to say when I get up here. I finally take it out, elaborately unfolded, and said, "My name is Joe." But I mean, he's such a joke now, I don't have to do that anymore.
I know. At some point, you feel bad about teasing about this because he's clearly slipping.
Yes, it's sad now. It's no longer funny. It's sad. But you got to imagine how terrified our international adversaries must be of the commander-in-chief of the American military, who literally takes direction from a person in an Easter Bunny outfit. I mean, can you imagine that? Yeah, I think you'd ever live long enough in this world to see the president of the United States being pulled away from interaction with citizens by some guy in a bunny suit.
Yeah, but the sad thing is, I'd rather have him be directed by the Easter Bunny than the influences he may have through Hunter Biden and his dealings. And if we follow that rabbit, where it hit that hole where it goes with China, Russia, Ukraine, and all of our international adversaries right now.
When I say it every day, I mean all this stuff is not a coincidence. It's not a result of incompetence. Obviously, Joe Biden is incompetent. Kamala Harris is the dumbest human being ever elected to high federal office. But I mean, they have as much to do with running this country as my car keys do, right? There are people out there that actually pull the strings. And Joe Biden, on March 21st of this year, addressing the Business Roundtable CEO luncheon, actually told the truth for once. And he was saying that an inflection point like this only comes around once every 3 or 4 generations, and that we have to use this inflection point and the war in Ukraine to create a new world order. What he said was, there's going to be a new world order, and we have to lead it. And that's the truth. That's what all the crises du jour, the open border, the inflation, the gas crisis, the war in Ukraine, the debacle in Afghanistan, all these crises du jour are designed to take your eye off the ball. And the ball is that what we're seeing happening right before our eyes is this new world order, this one world socialist government, this thing that Klaus Schwab calls a great reset, where you will own nothing and you'll be happy, which really means you will obey or else. And that's what is transpiring right in front of our eyes. We have to stop it right now.
I'm glad you bring that up. I think a lot of times when we start talking to politicians, I think a lot of them don't realize the big picture of where not necessarily just the Democrats, but where the Klaus Schwabs, where they're trying to take our country. And they realize that in order to bring the world to a standard, a same level, we can't bring the rest of the world up to America. We have to bring America down to the level of the rest of the world. And it seems that you recognize this.
Well, if you think about it, think about the World Health Organization as an example of where this country wants to go, where the powers that be want this country to end up. World Health Organization is run by a guy named Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus. He's a communist. He's a Stalinist. He used to run something called the Tigray People's Liberation Front, Ethiopia. If you guys remember the late Robert Mugabe, the butcher of Rhodesia, that took the wealthiest nation per capita on earth and destroyed it and drove it down to a level of poverty where the people are literally reduced to cannibalism. Tedros wanted him, Robert Mugabe, to be the goodwill ambassador for health. I mean, these are vicious communists. At their annual assembly in Switzerland last month, they proposed this global pandemic treaty, which the United States is promoting, which the Biden administration insisted on, which contains things such as, on a national and global level, disinformation and information, affirmative action to control it. Every member state was required to create a enforcement authority, a police force, to make their citizens comply with the World Health Organization requirements. That every on a national and global basis, there'd be control of travel, of digital pandemic passports and vaccine passports, all subject to control of the World Health Organization. And the Biden administration specifically insisted on amendments to the international rules that would prohibit member states, including the United States, from having any veto power over what the World Health Organization did in the member countries. In other words, we absolutely would cede our sovereignty to this non-governmental worldwide organization run by overt communists. And why would our government, of course, Donald Trump took us out of the WHO, Joe Biden puts us back in. Why would the United States government want to put us in an organization and make us subject to the control of organizations run by overt communists? The answer is because that's the goal they have for us. That role model, that form of government, exemplified by the Chinese Communist Party, is what they have in mind for us. It's their idea of the ideal government where the elites control everything, and the dumb schmucks like us are just the cattle in the field to be controlled and culled as necessary to achieve their goal, which is always unlimited power and total abolition of individualism and freedom. I mean, think of Mao Zedong, right?
Yeah, or Lenin or Stalin, any of them where they preach one thing to get power, and this is something that's been on my mind a lot. If this movement by, say, our dear overlords was positive, they could come out and tell us about it and tell us why it's positive, but they keep having to do it through subversive means.
Yeah.
And that tells me that, I mean, it's just like the Bolsheviks did. They came out promising worker rights and workers union. That was never a part of the plan. It was just
always just central control. And you look at our system of government, which has created the wealthiest nation on earth, except now where we've driven ourselves into irredeemable poverty. And then you look at the communists, and in the last 100 years have been responsible for the death of over 100 million of their own citizens. And I mean, you could not possibly tell the truth about that system of government and have anybody want to be a part of it. The only way you can sell it is by utopian lies.
I think the greatest summary of the difference between the two forms of government is the walls that they had built. We have to build a wall and and keep people out. They had to build a wall to keep people in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, people went through extreme measures at the risk of their lives. I'm old enough to have been in East Germany during the Soviet era, and to see the extreme measures that the East Germans and the Russians had to go through to keep their citizens from fleeing the utopia of communism, just amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's when you stop looking at your fellow humans as individual humans, and you look at them as chattel or as means to an end, and that's the difference between well, I would argue that we've kind of been heading down that path here for quite a while, slowly, nibble by nibble, but communism, that exemplifies it. That just shows it as it is.
Ultimately,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I want to hear from you.
I was going to say, I call the COVID lockdowns the final exam on American freedom. I always figured that at some point in our lives, FEMA would create some kind of full emergency and declare martial law and put us all under house arrest and tell us we couldn't go to work and we couldn't go to school and we couldn't go to church. But I figured they'd have to put a gun to our heads to make us comply. Then all of a sudden, 2 years and 3 months ago, the government just said so, and everybody did it, even if it cost them their livelihoods and their life savings and their businesses, even if it meant they couldn't see their parents and grandparents pass away, even if it meant that the folks had to die alone and terrified in nursing homes without being able to see their family. Even if you're a guy, you couldn't see your own children be born, and everybody just did it. There were no riots in the streets. There was no general uprising. It was a final exam on American freedom. It was a test to see how much the American people could take. And the answer was, the American people have been so completely cowed, they'll take anything. And now they're telling us that in this breadbasket of the world, we're now going to expect to have food shortages. They've had baby formula shortages. I mean, if you think people are willing to give up their rights over COVID, think how much they're going to be willing to give up their rights if their babies start to starve, or their kids start to starve, or they themselves start to starve. And that's what all this is about. And as you say, this is a culmination of decades. Now go back 100 years of insidious nibbling away at our freedoms and instilling themselves into every level of civilization and government and in entertainment and in education and the media, to where every day they come up with a new prohibition, a new line of thought that you're no longer allowed to have. And then they come up with catchphrases. When you think about it, think back 2 or 3 years and think if we'd ever actually be talking about whether or not a man with testicles ought to be able to compete against women in sports. But now if you were to ask, for example, Bruce Jenner, do you still have your testicles? You'd never be allowed on television again because now you're a transphobe, right? Just asking basic logical questions. We're supposed to pretend that these people are now untouchable and unquestionable. And if you question them, you're an evil person. And that's the control that these people now have over us. They control the thought, they control communications. And when the president of the United States, or at least the idiot in chief, says that we're going to have a disinformation governance board in the United States of America, and there's not 50 Republican senators standing out in the Capitol steps screaming, you can't have a disinformation governance board in the United States. You can't have a ministry of truth, or we've lost our republic. There's no longer a constitution. You cannot do this. But no, it's just crickets.
I know.
You brought up the Republican Party, and that's what I like, because we expect this from the Democrats. That's who they've been from their very founding. They have always been collectivists. They viewed the slaves as a collective. They viewed the Native Americans as a collective. They viewed the Japanese as a collective. They viewed the Germans as a collective. They've always been collectivists. We in the Republican Party were always a party of individualism. And since Teddy Roosevelt, we can see how we've started to shift as a party. And really recently, I think we've seen a lot of our own Republicans forget the idea of individualism and move towards that collective philosophy. And you're right. All 50 of them should have been out there immediately after that and said, no, we can't have the government censoring people this way.
Yeah, and I always say the rhino that you trust is more dangerous than the Democrat that you fear.
I don't know how you dare say that to a person who's subject to Mitt Romney at a time like this. Good sir.
Now, why did you people elect Mitt Romney?
Hey.
We did not. We have 3 cities in Utah, and they did it.
2018, I was one of the many folks that jumped in and decided to give the people a choice. So I ran against him in 2018. So there was a definite disappointment as we watched the numbers start to come in from that, and watched him go through and take the convention almost, and then ultimately take out the primary, take out a very good local senator.
Well, it's unfortunately the truth everywhere and right now in the Senate campaign in Missouri, we're seeing the exact same thing, that the people that claim they're leading the race aren't campaigning. They're not out there meeting the people. What they've got is billionaires that are dumping millions of dollars into their super PACs. And television advertising is so expensive, you cannot do it with your campaign money, because at a $2,900 a person cap on campaign contributions, you cannot collect enough money to do a TV campaign. People will spend tens, if not $100 million in this campaign before it's over. And so what it comes down to is that billionaires write checks for millions of dollars to super PACs to promote the people that they want to have in office. And when a billionaire gives you $1 million, it's not a gift. It's an investment. And what they want is they want their investment back. What they do is they take their money to buy votes, to buy a politician that they can then control. And the problem is that it works. The problem is that most people don't live politics 24/7. What they hear is a kind of general background noise of what the powers that be want you to think. And then they see a bunch of slick commercials. And, I go to every possible event. I hit every little town. I hit the 4th of July parades and the county fairs. The people that claim they're leading this race, Eric Greitens, our disgraced ex-governor, and Eric Schmidt, our attorney general, never show up for anything, because they're doing the Biden campaign. They're counting on their billionaire dollars to buy their votes, to confuse the population and make them look great. Even though, for example, Eric Greitens was a Democrat until 2016, used to work with George Soros entities and with the Aspen Institute, and our attorney general, although he's been suing everybody in the Western Hemisphere ever since he announced that he was running for the Senate. When he was in the Missouri Senate, they called him the 9th Democrat. He now campaigns as a big opponent of China, but when he was in the Missouri Senate, he sponsored a bill to spend $480 million of our money to build a China hub here in the city of St. Louis, and voted for a bill to sell Missouri farmland to the Chinese. Now all of a sudden he's become the champion of the right. You got to wonder when he decided the wind was blowing to the right. That's how he had to campaign. That's the way all these folks are. And yet, because they are, what's the polite way of saying it, willing to go along with the powers that be, they're having lots of money dumped on them. Mm-hmm. Down at CPAC this spring, one of the conservative networks was interviewing Eric Schmidt, our attorney general, and said, now, if you get elected, will you vote for Mitch McConnell as majority leader? And he said, oh, that's a hypothetical. I can't answer it. And finally, they pressed him on it to where he had to give an answer. And he says, I don't know. I'll have to wait and see. I'll have to consult with my Senate colleagues like Rand Paul and Ted Cruz. In other words, he hadn't been told the party line yet. He didn't know what the answer was supposed to be. Same thing with Vicky Hartzler, one of the United States representatives. That's one of my competitors. She was asked the exact same question, gave the exact same answer verbatim. I'll have to wait and see what the Senate is made up of, and I'll have to talk to my colleagues like Rand Paul and Ted Cruz. Well, it's easy to know why, for example, Josh Hawley endorses Vicky Hartzler and why Ted Cruz endorses Eric Schmidt, because these folks are just politicians which will go with the wind wherever the money blows them. And that's, I say it every day. If the people want real change, they can't vote for the traditional politicians. There's no time for politics as usual. There's no time for politicians as usual. If we're going to save this country, we've got to do it right now. And wouldn't it be wonderful if somebody who wasn't a politician, who has no big money backers, could actually get elected to the Senate, could actually get out there and say, look, we, the people, we can really pull this back. We can really withdraw that consent of the governed and wake up Washington, D.C. and say, look, this is our country and we can take it back. We don't have to do what the billionaires tell us. We can actually have a voice of our own.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. And I'm on a kick. Right now, I want to enforce the 10th Amendment and eliminate the 16th.
Yeah.
And those are what I want to do. You know, I want to enforce the states' rights, and I want to do away with direct taxation, and just make it happen.
Can we throw the 17th in there too?
Yeah, well,
What's the 17th?
That's where we
17th makes senators elected by the people.
Oh
Exactly.
yeah, popular vote. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so the senators actually represent the states.
Yeah, let the state get them in there. Well, I want to talk about. I want to waylay us for a second and talk about a Missouri law that has a twinkle in my eye. Where you guys and break this law down for me. Where you guys wrote a law that said no Missouri official can enforce any federal firearms statute.
Yeah, it's the Second Amendment Preservation Act. In fact, I was standing right next to the governor when he signed the bill last spring at a place called Frontier Justice, which is a gun shop up in the Kansas City area. What it does is it prohibits any Missouri law enforcement, actually anybody who's paid with Missouri tax dollars, from participating in the enforcement of any federal unconstitutional invasions of our Second Amendment rights. The individual police officers or the individual law enforcement officers aren't subject to the penalty, but their entities are. And so if, for example, the federal government comes in and tries to violate, we've got an even stricter version, a more lenient for the individual and stricter against gun control version of the Second Amendment under the Missouri Constitution. And if any federal officer comes in to enforce something contrary to our Constitution or the Second Amendment, and a police or law enforcement entity cooperates in that, they're subject to a $50,000 per violation fine. So there's a teeth in the statute, and the left is trying to sell that as a defund the police statute, right? That's just such BS. I mean, the ability to lie with a smile on your face is one of the things that defines our opposition.
Well, they've totally had their butt handed to them by that policy they rolled out a year ago. So, I mean, the emperor has no clothes on that one. Now, how far back does this defend the Second Amendment go? Does it go back and apply towards, say, the NFA, or is the NFA allowed within this?
Well, it is subject in Missouri to the Missouri Constitution as well. You know, if you get me on a roll, I tell you, I think we ought to do away with the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Administration completely.
Do you need? Do you want me to carry a sign for you? What do you need?
I mean, that's one of the departments, along with the Department of Education, that I would eliminate today if I had the power to do so.
My tough question would be is if I had the IRS and the ATF on the chopping block, I'd be sweating bullets to decide which one I got rid of first.
Well, and then think about this. The Post Office Department is buying ammunition right now. Did you know that?
Oh, they have been. So is the Department of Education.
Yeah, exactly. What does the Post Office and the Department of Education need with 9mm, right? 223.
What's going on that we don't know?
So I work with, I'm an environmental engineer, but I work for industry, not against it. And within my field, we always have that question. I work at a military facility, and the EPA is coming to do an inspection in a few months. And our question is the EPA going to show up armed or not? Can we allow them on their property armed or not? They are federal agents. However, ours is a military facility. It doesn't allow firearms on the facility outside of your personal vehicle. And I just think, why is the EPA showing up with firearms? It's the EPA. I see no institution where protecting the environment requires the use of firearms.
Yeah. You know, there's this thing, as your buddy there mentioned, the 10th Amendment. I don't remember there being any place in the United States Constitution that gives the federal government the power to create regulatory, non-responsive entities that have life and death enforcement powers.
Exactly.
I mean, I talk about when the president announced the Disinformation Governance Board as a part of Homeland Security, which is a military organization. You know, what are they going to do? They're going to come and haul us off and put us in prison or kill us if we should say something the government feels is untrue. And then think about red flag laws. You get me on a roll on this, I'll never stop.
Oh,
but think think about how recently it was that in the Soviet Union, political thought that was not approved by the government was considered sick thought. And the people that had inappropriate political positions were institutionalized and declared to be insane. I mean, how big of a stretch is it to think that this government that thinks that it can censor what we say and talk about will think that if you have right now, you see it in the works in so many states right now, and in what Joe Biden talks about, where if you have adverse political opinions, you have to be of an unstable mind.
And that seems to be, well, and to me, it's not even so much, it seems like it's urban versus rural people. And it seems like the urban people have taken over and they want to force their lifestyle on anyone around them. And I think unless we handicap the presidency to where it's drawn back to that executive office only does the jobs enumerated in the Constitution, and we lean on the 10th Amendment and let states kind of organize themselves and bolster themselves to where then the 9th Amendment can take over and the individuals and maybe even just communities can start enacting their rules and policies a little better, I think we're doomed.
But, and then you add to that the concept of innocent until proven guilty. So many of these suggestions, even by I was watching Fox News this morning, and even they were all talking about how, this, the guy that shot up the parade, we should have known, and we should have taken his rights away at some time earlier in life. Well, every entity out there that's on the left is pushing for the removal of your rights without due process and without any used to after you commit a crime, you get accused of committing that crime, and then the government has to prove that you actually did that crime. Now the government comes in, takes your rights away, reverses a burden where now the citizen has to be able to prove that they're not criminals rather than vice versa. And of course, I'll go into my story in a little bit, but the whole purpose of all of this is to make defending yourself against the left so expensive and time consuming that ordinary people cannot do it. It's like all those poor bastards that are, political prisoners in DC right now that have no way to defend themselves. And by the way, where the hell is the outrage over that? How come every Republican congressman and every Republican senator isn't standing on the Capitol steps screaming, these are political prisoners. These are out of the 350 to 500 people that broke down my gate, stormed into my neighborhood, threatened to kill me, rape and murder my wife, burn down my house, burn down my office building, and kill my dog. Not a single one of those have done a day in jail. We've got hundreds of people in solitary confinement in DC right now on charges of no more than trespass or parading without a license or no charges at all. And what do you call those people? You call them political prisoners. Yeah. What do you call a country that holds political prisoners? You don't call it a free republic. You call it a tyranny. And that's what we have right now. And the fact that no Republicans are saying a word about it is because they're afraid of ending up in one of those holes themselves. And that's what this is all about. Is I call it right now, we're experiencing a coup by subpoena. The left is charging everybody that they think might be an opponent in the next election cycle, that if not actually get them convicted of something, at least tarnish their reputation and keep them busy defending themselves rather than running for office. And if you can keep people in prison in solitary confinement for now 18 months for no crime at all, that's got to be a pretty strong deterrent to a free exchange of ideas.
Yeah, and they've tortured a few of them. There's been guys beaten. One guy lost vision in his right eye. Another guy has onset of epileptic seizures from the beatings. And this is cruel and unusual punishment.
And designed to be that way to intimidate anybody that might wish to raise their head up. And I mean, I think about it every day. We think that, once the Senate campaign is over, that if I don't get elected, that we'll get that Roger Stone treatment someday where they'll kick in our doors after calling up CNN so they can film us being hauled out in our underpants.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I think if we continue heading down this path, we're going to see open civil war in this country.
Well, I hope not. I think that during the Biden administration, they did a survey or a research project that indicated that if that occurs, that the death toll will be something like 35 million people. So if there's any possible way to reach a political solution to this, it really needs to be done. You know, I'm not totally on board with all of his philosophies, but Gandhi had a great idea about just saying no. And I think that if the American people would just say no, if we'd all stand up together and say we will resist, we will not comply whenever the federal government wants to impose some kind of unconstitutional mandate, we all just stood up and said no. There aren't enough policemen. And by the way, remember what happened in the second Russian Revolution when under Mikhail Gorbachev, they were doing this thing they called glasnost, where he was trying to convince the Russian serfs that they weren't really slaves, that they were really equal and free citizens. Well, you know, when you tell people they're free long enough, some of them might actually believe it. And so they started to assemble on Red Square, and Gorbachev called out the Red Army. Well, Boris Yeltsin got in the turret of a tank, turned it towards the Kremlin, and said, "We're not going to comply." And that was the end of it. I mean, that's all it took. And you as much as the left might like to think they can, you really can't kill the entire population because it's self-defeating. I mean, you need some people out there to be your slaves. But if everybody stands up, we'd have this thing beat overnight.
Oh, it'd be nice, wouldn't it? It'd be nice. Yeah.
That's where our prosperity's been too much of a blessing. We're fat and happy.
You go around, I see this all the time. I mean, I say it every day. You look around at the average restaurant, look around the average Walmart, look around any kind of county fair, and you see what has become of the American people. And you see how slovenly and overweight and what lack of self-respect they seem to have. I mean, the bottom line is we've all been taught to be fat and happy and just think that the world will take care of itself and we don't need to participate. And if that's one thing that I think we could really change to help this country is teach people that self-respect is important, that self-reliance is important, and that just looking after yourself and your family is important. And you can't do it if what you're doing is always just sitting back in your chair and watching TV or playing on your cell phone and hoping somebody else takes care of your future.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. It seems like we folded on, well, out here, I'm going to be honest, out here in my county, we didn't fold on the COVID question. There were a scattering of people who did their nominal usual Facebook rants about someone not wearing a mask or, you know, the usual thing. You get those people everywhere and they're fine. You actually want a few of those spread through your community because you need to hear a crazy person voice once in a while to know what sane looks like. But anyways, but out here we're in a red county, completely red. And we're in a red state, completely red, except for 3 cities. You know, and they're not even big cities. All 3 of our cities put together don't even make a suburb of Chicago, but they're the ones who get the other guy. And so we were rather lenient out here on COVID for the most part.
I think a lot of that's due to our sheriff. Our sheriff instantly came out and said that his deputies have more important things to do than to go around and enforce ridiculous mandates.
Yeah, and it's not a law. He says, I only enforce laws. So our sheriff was a stand-up guy on it. So there was a lot to do with that. And I know,
but our party wasn't where it needed to be. We still shut down businesses and we still shut down mom and pop organizations. There's plenty of small businesses that haven't come back.
I think that was the state that did a lot of that.
Yeah, exactly. Our state, a red state, still succumbed to that sweet, enticing power of being able to control people's lives.
Yeah. Well, you know, I was coming back from lunch today, and there was a lady in a nice foreign-made vehicle driving past me in the car alone with a mask on, right? And I feel like, you know, under red flag laws, is that some indicia that she lacks the competency to be operating a motor vehicle? If she's so crazy, she thinks that she has to wear a mask in her own car to protect herself.
She might give herself COVID though. And then she would, I mean, could you imagine the hard time she would have to give herself after giving herself COVID? There'd be a whole guilt trip. It'd be an ordeal.
Oh, I know. But in all seriousness, this concept of talking people into doing things which they know intellectually is completely nonsense, like wearing a cloth mask to prevent the spread of virus. I mean, where the weave of that mask is like trying to prevent bowling balls from going through the atmosphere, right? It's ridiculous. But yet, our own county executive here in St. Louis County uh, is a doctor. He's an anesthesiologist, and he imposed all these kinds of restrictions and mask mandates. Well, the Missouri legislature specifically passed a bill, it was House Bill 271, that allowed the county governments, in this case St. Louis County Council, on a vote of a simple majority to override any executive orders. And they did so immediately. He ignored it, right? And he would come out there, and I would go there every Tuesday night in a county council meeting and talk about how ridiculous it is, and how if he tried to go into the operating room to pass gas wearing that ridiculous piece of fabric over his face, they'd throw him out in a second. But they do. They get this tyrannical power, and they refuse to give it up. And whether you're the county executive or the president of the school board or the president of the United States, there's no political organization too small to where you feel that you have to just suck in all that power you can and hold on to it for the last second.
Well, parasites are going to parasite.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
okay. We've been talking for 40 minutes now. I want to hear about what about that notorious day when you became the most hated man in every big city in the U.S. because you defended. Now, I want to throw out a caveat. I thought you looked stunning, and you were kind of wearing a nice suit that day, and I thought, I mean, it was a stunning picture. You and your wife were dressed well, came out on the patio, and I was just like, wow, it looked like you would. Well, it sounds like you were at kind of like maybe not a dinner party, but a gathering, and it was interrupted by the mob.
Hey, Patty, hand me one of the cards.
I saw the cards that you guys had signed and were giving out. That's great.
So this isn't dinner party where we just got back from the farm. You look closely.
Oh, you just got back from the farm?
Mud under my fingernails, right?
Oh, okay.
I didn't have any shoes or socks on. We're out in the patio preparing to barbecue dinner when the mob started to form. Let me give the little background of this. St. Louis is a murder capital of the world. It's a remarkably dangerous place. Rudy Giuliani and Bernie Carrick came down and spent some time with us in the fall of 2020. We're out for dinner, and I'm comparing notes with Bernie Carrick, the old commissioner of police in New York City, on how dangerous New York is versus St. Louis. 8,400,000 residents of the city of New York, and at that point that year, they had about 300 murders. Only 300,000 people in the city of St. Louis, and by that point, we'd had 258, 20 times the murder rate of New York City when New York was having a bad year. And that's the background level of violence in St. Louis. That doesn't take into account the George Floyd effect. And on the night of June the 1st, June the 2nd of 2020, those people that claim the moral high ground, those champions of diversion, diversity and inclusion, decided to show their love for the city of St. Louis by burning it down and pillaging and looting. That night, they shot 4 police officers, killed Police Captain David Dorn, and destroyed downtown St. Louis. And then during the month of June, more and more and more of the buildings around my neighborhood started to get boarded up when they got looted. And one of the nice things about living in a city of St. Louis, where the Democrats have had one-party control for over 70 years, and you've got a George Soros-funded prosecutor, is you get to advertise your crimes ahead of time. And so this Antifa organization in St. Louis called Expect Us, which is headed by a young lady you may know the name of, Cori Bush, publishes a flyer saying that they're going to have a mob action in my neighborhood on June the 28th. And it says they think this is a joke. We got to be loud. And plus, we have a surprise. Well, I'm trying to make this as short as possible because we're running short on time. But my wife and our adult daughter, who'd come down from Chicago to have dinner with us that night, we're sitting out on the patio barbecuing a pork loin, and we start hearing the mob form down the street. And the sound gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and we start hearing all the same idiot chants, whose streets are streets, no justice, no peace, no racist police. And my favorite one, because it's being chanted by Cori Bush, you can't stop the revolution. Well, all of a sudden, all of the street outside my private neighborhood, and we're talking a thoroughfare 6 lanes wide, fills with angry people, as far south as we can see, banging on the street with sticks and chanting and screaming. And all of a sudden, the gate that separates our private neighborhood from the public part of St. Louis crashes open, gets bent down to the ground, and hundreds of people start streaming in. Well, I stood out in the corner of the porch, and I said what I always describe as the 2 most racist, white supremacist words known in the English language. I said, private property. Now, being communists, that pissed them off.
Oh, yeah.
They start swarming in ever so much more so. And my wife and daughter go in the house to call 911 to no avail. And I reached around the corner where I had it stashed and grabbed my AR-15. And I stood out there on the porch and started saying all these rude and impolite things to the mob, like private property, get out. I actually swore once. I said, get the hell out of my neighborhood. And they keep pouring in and pouring in. And all of a sudden, I see Patty, who I thought still in the house calling 911, show up on the grass in front of me, right in front of the mob, waving that dumbass little Bryco pistol over her head.
Hey, I just got to say, your wife stood by your side I mean, good on her. She didn't.
She stood not by my side. I had a hedge and a low wall and about 40 feet of grass between me and the mob. She was out there thinking in front of us. But now I've got a problem because she's in my line of fire. If something happens, I might accidentally hit her. And we've been married for 36 years at the time. I didn't want to accidentally hit her. So now I've got to come down in the grass. And that's when you start seeing those famous pictures. That was we didn't put off a shot. All we did was exercise our Second Amendment rights and just the intimidation value of having the weapons there held off the mob. And, what the world saw was the last 32 seconds of a 17.5-minute event after almost everybody had gone.
I'll bet that was a very long 17 minutes.
Oh, and when you're facing hundreds of people screaming death and rape and arson at you, it's a long process. But that's what everybody's heard about. What you probably haven't heard is that the mob came back the next Friday specifically to kill us and burn down the house. We'd gotten a tip from a client of ours who a nice young African-American woman who we'd represented for years. We'd represented her mom and her sister, and we'd gone to her college graduation and her husband's funeral. And there were times when we'd be the only Caucasians at family gatherings. We really thought this young lady was a family member, but she had become a brainwashed member of that Antifa organization. And she called us up that Tuesday morning and said that what we had done was inexcusable and we were going to have to die, and they were going to come back on Friday to kill us and burn down the house. And this wasn't an idle kind of passing comment. She kept Patty on the phone for an hour and a half, just ripping her up one side and down the other. So needless to say, we're a little concerned. From time to time in our business, we have to hire secondary employment cops for security. None of the St. Louis City or county cops that we normally deal with wanted any part of it for fear of the bad press. We got referred to this entity down in Farmington, Missouri, which is a little town about 100 miles away, which does worldwide security for corporations, special forces kinds of guys. They'd gotten bad press over the Ferguson riots, and they didn't want to have anything to do with it for fear of the bad press. So I said to the owner, what the heck am I supposed to do? And he said, if I were you, I'd take whatever I can't live without, put it in the vehicles, and abandon the house. And I said, no effing way in heck we're going to do that. We'll go down with the ship if we have to, but we're not going to abandon the house. Well, it turns out earlier in the week, I'd gotten a call from the White House. And the gentleman says, the president wants to express his support. And if there's ever anything we can do for you, let us know. Well, I called that number up when everything else failed. And I said, well, now's a pretty stinking good time. Okay. And so he gave me Mark Meadows' cell phone number. And I called up Mark Meadows and he got on the job. And then I called up Tucker Carlson, the second call I made. Tucker put us on the air and said, I'm talking to Mark McCloskey. I can hear Mrs. McCloskey sobbing in the background. To make a long story short, he said, the city police have been ordered to stand down. The state's not going to come to his aid. And if we don't do something, they're going to get killed. Once again, to make a long story short, the mob shows up Friday night, now numbering 1,000. But by the time they get there, we've got 6 ex-Navy SEALs. We've got 10 secondary employment cops. We got the FBI light aircraft circling the top of the house. We got FBI snipers on the rooftops. We have what we used to call in the Reagan administration, peace through superior firepower. And once again, we held them off. Nobody got shot. Not a shot got fired. We didn't get the all clear till about 4 o'clock in the morning. But my favorite part of the night was Cory Bush standing outside my gate, chanting into the megaphone, "You can't stop the revolution. You can't stop the revolution." Well, Jim the SEAL standing next to me, resting his hands on the butt of his M4, and he says, "Oh, yes, I can." Once again, we held off the mob. But I knew that since we were the first people in the country to stand up against Antifa and just say no, I knew that the left could not resist taking some kind of action against us, particularly here where we have a George Soros-funded prosecutor who views her job not as enforcing the law, but protecting criminals against honest citizens. And so we were just waiting to get charged. She eventually charges each of us with 2 Class E felonies.
Now, what's her name? What's the prosecutor's name?
Her name is Kim Gardner.
Yeah, Gardner.
Yeah. She's a complete incompetent.
Now, isn't she run out now? Didn't she get in trouble for something a couple months back?
She got a slap on the wrist. She got a public reprimand. She's still our circuit attorney.
Oh, yay. Okay, go
on.
Jeez.
Yeah. But because she is just as dumb as a sack of hammers, she used us in her campaign propaganda. And so we got her booted off the case for bias. We got the whole circuit attorney's office booted off the case for bias. We then get a special prosecutor appointed, and he dismisses the felonies and the gun charges. And then he reads me this charge in court. He says that I purposely placed other people in apprehension of imminent physical injury. I laughed out loud and said, "Hell yes, I did. That's what the guns were for, right? If that's a crime in Missouri, I did it. And I can't."
Well, hold on. I got a question? They came onto private property, which meant that they placed themselves in that condition.
Oh yeah,
the
absolutely.
condition existed. They moved into that condition. You didn't place them in that condition. They're lucky they didn't come to my house, because I might have been a little more trigger happy. I might have figured, hell, I'll fill about 5 or 6 oak boxes tonight, and we'll see how they feel about it tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, we hear a lot of that, but you think about the January 6th and how far underground I'd be for the rest of my life if we hadn't exercised a little restraint. But the governor had already promised. Here's a scenario, right? As soon as all this happens, President Trump went on TV on Judge Janine's program and came to our defense and said that we not only hadn't we done anything wrong, that what we did was laudable. The governor of the state of Missouri said the same thing and quoted the president. The attorney general, who's now one of my opponents for the nomination for Senate, came out on our side. 14 sitting United States congressmen signed a letter asking then Attorney General Bill Barr to investigate our prosecutor for violating my civil rights. And so it's kind of hard for me to feel that I did anything wrong. The governor immediately promised to pardon us. The problem is that under Missouri law, he can't pardon us until we've actually been convicted of something. And that's why we agreed to plead guilty to these minor misdemeanors and pay our fine. And the governor could pardon us, and we, they were then barred from doing anything else, at least on the state level against us.
Where's your Armalite at?
I'm sorry?
What did they do with your Armalite?
Well, it's actually a real Colt AR-15. It's the second one I bought. I've had that gun since 1989. It's still in the hands of the Sheriff's Department of the city of St. Louis. We've been fighting that battle. We argued the last motion on that May the 5th, I think, and the judge is still sitting on a ruling. But we're going to keep fighting that, and it'll probably go to trial in the city of St. Louis. Given the jury of my peers in the city of St. Louis, we'll probably lose that battle and then have to take it up in the Court of Appeals. But
I noticed it was an original A2. Still had the triangle foregrip, but
oh no, I've got that one too. The first one I bought when I turned 21. It's got the no forward assist plunger and the triangular forestock. This one had a forward assist plunger and the new and improved.
It had the round one.
Yeah.
I thought I saw in the pictures.
I'm glad I didn't have my original one that day, but that's one of my oldest friends.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
but we're still fighting to get it back. The thing that most people don't understand, Missouri is a castle law doctrine, right? And we have a no retreat law here. The problem is that those are affirmative defenses, meaning that the government can charge you with a crime, as they did in our case, and we can then raise the castle doctrine as a defense, which we did. but then both of those issues go to the jury. And in a hostile environment like the city of St. Louis, you got to count on the jury ruling correctly on both issues, which would be unlikely. And the quirk of the law is that under Missouri law, let's say a jury finds us guilty of those Class C felonies because they're leftist and propagandized, and then the governor pardons us. That doesn't help, because under Missouri law, once we've been found guilty of a felony, even the pardon will not restore our law licenses. So we would have been deprived of our livelihood for the rest of our lives, if we'd gone to trial, and even if the governor pardoned us. So we had to exercise the better part of valor, as they say. But we got the felonies, struck anyway, because that's just BS generated by that Soros prosecutor.
Well, I'm not that bright, so I mean, yeah. And I got a little more fire in my belly about the riots. Now, your wife's a lawyer as well?
Yes, she is.
Okay. And I think who was it that said only a fool has himself as a lawyer?
Well, that's true. And we hired the best lawyers.
And you guys,
in St. Louis.
You guys hired lawyers.
It's not cheap, and we're still we still are. When all the legal stuff, all the criminal stuff is done and gone, then the Bar Association of the state of Missouri, which is, as I said, it was too woke to let it go. They asked the Missouri Supreme Court to suspend our law licenses on the basis of what we did in defending ourselves was a crime of moral turpitude, and therefore we didn't have the moral ability to be lawyers anymore. And I took the position, this is what I said in my brief, that when the President of the United States, the governor of the state of Missouri, the Attorney General of the state of Missouri, and 14 sitting congressmen not only say I did nothing wrong, but what I did was laudable, it's pretty hard to interpret that as a crime of moral turpitude. But nonetheless, the Missouri Supreme Court sanctioned our law licenses and put us on probation for a year. So I get to, as long as we're good little boys and girls and don't get arrested for anything for the next year, then we're all free and clear. We get to keep practicing law in the meantime. But I thought that was BS, so I appealed that to the United States Supreme Court. And unfortunately, even though the Supreme Court ruled in our favor and, at least 3 important topics in the last few weeks, they denied my writ. So I'm not going to get a chance to argue that with the Supremes. But the fun thing is that we were ordered to do 100 hours of pro bono legal work. And so I called up my buddies at Project Veritas, and I said, you guys are a 501c4 community service organization, aren't you? And they said, yes. I said, I'd love to work for you for free. And so I submitted that as my pro bono work, and the Bar Association, yeah. And so I appealed that to the Missouri Supreme Court, and yeah. And so we're still looking for a good conservative organization to volunteer for. In fact, when I put in my second quarterly report to our probation officer, identified a Missouri Freedom Project as my new pro bono target. We'll wait and have them tell me, no, I can't do that. And so at some point I'll say, how about some nice leftist organization? And they'll say yes, and I'll say, yeah.
It's awful. I want to cover for a second kind of the shady things that I've heard that the prosecution did during the trial. The pistol that your wife had was a non-functioning pistol, correct?
Yeah. First of all, there was no trial. We got all the gun charges dropped before everything came through. Yeah. The police report said that the pistol was in inoperative condition. It was sent to the forensic lab where it was disassembled, reassembled, and made functional. That's what the police report says. So
didn't the prosecutor?
My wife had never had a pistol in her hand before in her life. Even if that gun were in perfect shape, she wouldn't know how to put a round in the chamber. If it had a round in the magazine, she wouldn't know how to load it. She sure as heck wouldn't know how to take the safety off and fire it. And by the way, that was one of those. I have sued one gun manufacturer in my life, but I've sued them a number of times, and that's Jennings Brico. They make these cheap throwdown guns for the drug trade. $50 9mm pistols. They have this bad habit of going fully automatic and killing their owners. And I've had a number of those cases. This was an exhibit gun in one of those cases, so it's those guns. I'll tell you not a funny story because it had kind of a bad result. But the gun that case was an exhibit in, the gun had gone fully automatic and killed my client in rural Virginia on the July the 4th weekend, 2002. That gun was so dangerous that if you put more than one round in the magazine, you pull the slide back and rack around, and it'll go fully automatic and it'll fire until the magazine's out. And the expert witness that I was using on these cases, I sent the gun up to him to be examined, and I called him up and I said, look, this is the most dangerous gun you've ever held in your hands in your life. Never put more than one round in the chamber. It will go fully automatic, and be very, very careful. And I didn't hear anything from him for 4 months. And then his lawyer calls me up and says, hey, Mark, you're not going to want to hear this, but so-and-so shot himself with your gun. Because when he put the first round in, he pulled back the slide, let the slide drop, and then let his hand go in front of the barrel.
Oh.
And it went auto, put off that round, put it right through his hand. But I mean, but this was that case came about because my client was out in his hunting lease in Western Virginia, loaded the magazine, put the magazine in the pistol, pulled back the slide, racked in around. It did not go off then, but when he set it on the top of his pickup truck, just that was enough to jar it to where the sear disengaged and it went fully auto, spun around and put a bolt in his head.
Oh,
jeez.
And so that's where that particular pistol came from. And but that's a long story. For the short answer is, yeah, they took it apart, put it back together, and made it work.
Yeah, I heard that she ordered the forensic lab to make it functional so that she could charge you with the additional it being a functional weapon.
Yeah, that was part of the charge. It had to be readily capable of lethal use. So
yeah.
But you can say whatever you want about her in our case, but that's not the worst of it. This woman is just an amazing thing. She let the murderer of a client of mine go free last summer because the client of mine, a son, was murdered in cold blood on videotape. He and another young man were having a verbal dispute about a girl, I think. The dispute's over. Our guy goes back towards his car. Murderer gets a gun out of his car, comes up and shoots my guy in the head, all on videotape. And yet the prosecutor, or this Kim Gardner, assigns that case to an assistant prosecutor who she knows is out on maternity leave.
Yeah,
and the defense lawyers say, I want to see the evidence, right? They've got a right to it. Circuit Attorney's Office doesn't produce any evidence because there's nobody prosecuting the case. Judge issues an order saying, give the defendant the evidence. Nobody shows up for that hearing from the Circuit Attorney's Office. No evidence is produced. The judge then issues another order, rule to show cause why the Circuit Attorney's Office shouldn't be held in contempt of court for failure to comply with the court's last order, and has that rule to show cause hand-delivered by a sheriff's deputy to the Circuit Attorney's Office, so they can't claim they didn't get a copy of it. They have that hearing. Nobody from the Circuit Attorney's Office shows up because, once again, the Circuit Attorney assigned that case to a woman who was not there. Judge writes an order saying, essentially, I hate to release this animal upon the public, but it's not my job to prosecute cases. And if the prosecutor won't prosecute this case, I've got no choice but to let him go. And then Kim Gardner issues a press release that day saying, no harm, no foul, because we still got him in custody, when in fact he'd been released the Wednesday before. And that's what we've got going on in the city of St. Louis now. The murder capital of the world. We've got a prosecutor that refuses to prosecute crimes, that has this thing that she calls her exclusionary list, where she believes that certain police officers had posted racist things on their Facebook pages in the past, and therefore, no matter what the crime is, no matter what the evidence is, she won't prosecute those crimes. You imagine being a police officer in the city of St. Louis, in the most dangerous city in the country, going out there to protect citizens, not knowing whether or not, no matter what you do, that criminal is going to be held accountable, risking your life to help other people, and not knowing whether or not that criminal is just going to get set free because either the circuit attorney is incompetent or has a racial bias against you.
God, it's just, it's an awful predicament. Awful. The whole thing. I hope you get your weapon back. I have to say that. I hope that it eventually lands on a court that that first of all sees that you should be able to defend your property. But mind if we go through a few comments real quick before we close this down?
Sure. Let me just say one thing clear. My opponents always say that we voluntarily gave up those weapons. Well, we didn't. They executed a search warrant on us and came out there with a squad of police officers. So If that's voluntary relinquishment, this is the Soviet Union.
Yeah. Voluntary.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, literally, the left has gone full criminal. They've gone to where they argue against logic, they argue against reason. They've gone full criminal. And I'm not even a Republican, but I can honestly say me not being a Republican might be helpful. I'm definitely not a Democrat. All right, David, the co-host, he's screaming from the great beyond. He says, we need this guy in office. Okay, you ready for a tough one? Do you support the free and unrestricted use of Bitcoin by the people?
Well, I have to admit some ignorance on the issue of Bitcoin. I've told all the people that are advocates for cryptocurrency that anything that isn't controlled by the government is a good thing. However, I suspect that as soon, and it's happening right now, as soon as cryptocurrency gets too much traction and poses a significant risk to the establishment, that it'll be progressively ground down to nothing and federalized to be polite. But yeah, I'm generally a real advocate for any kind of hard currency that isn't subject to manipulation by the government. Unfortunately, I think that Bitcoin is now becoming subject to manipulation by the government.
Yeah. We do have a listener from the left, left a comment and said, I don't think I like this guy. That's fine, Corey, but I want you to think about you're on the side that wanted people subjected to the mob. He was sitting in his own home, his own property, and the mob came on his property to destroy, to loot, to harm, to intimidate, to whatever. I want you to just take that in your mind, that you are on the side that you want the mob to be able to have that power. That's like saying that the KKK in the 30s should have had the power to ride on to, say, Malcolm X's. What was his initial last name? Little. That was his original last name. The KKK came to his house and hung his father. That's submitting to the mob. That's what you're saying should have been done.
Additionally, the view that many people on the left express is the same view that they see now, that African Americans shouldn't own firearms. I lived in Chicago for a while, and all I saw was neighborhoods destroyed because people couldn't defend themselves.
Yeah.
We saw the Democrats shortly after the Civil War make sure and fight hard so that those African Americans could not own firearms, allowing the Ku Klux Klan, the Democrats' militant wing, to come in and hang and intimidate anyone they wanted to. The Republicans have always stood up for the right to bear arms because it's the right of the individual to protect themselves. African Americans were terrorized in the South because of the Democrats' beliefs on firearms, and they're the exact same beliefs that they're still pushing today.
Yeah. As my bumper sticker said 40 years ago on the back of my 68 GTO, when guns are outlawed, only outlaws will have guns.
Yep. And hey, and I'm sorry, I'm a radical. I am. I know everyone's saying we need to fight this politically and everything else, but I don't know. I'm kind of at the point where I'm thinking political doesn't have an answer to this anymore.
Well, my wife is less worried that we can't win this thing politically than that we can't win it sociologically. That the attitude of Americans has been so modified over the last 40 or 50 years that bringing them back. That when I go to Republican functions, I'm 65 years old and I'm usually amongst the youngest people there.
Mm-hmm.
And you look around the room, you think, where's this party going to be in 15 years? And the generation, my daughter's age, who's been trained to be kind of passive and allowing the world to pass them by. The current generation, the kids getting out of high school today, they're all into this Klaus Schwab concept of not owning anything and having the government give you everything you want and not have to work hard. But that's the thing that's going to be the hardest to overcome. Every place I go around the country, every business has got a sign out saying now hiring all positions, and they can't find anybody to do anything. I mean, you can't get a kid to mow your grass these days. You can't pay a kid to do anything. In some of the counties in Missouri, our sheriff's deputies are making $14 an hour, while the McDonald's across the street's paying $15 an hour and can't get people to work. You know, that's going to be the greatest problem to overcome, is get people back to work ethic, get people back to the concept that they have to make their lives with their own two hands through their own hard work and determination, and not expect somebody else to take care of all your wants and needs.
Oh yeah. And again, back to 10th Amendment, I think states need to wrestle back that power to make overall economic decisions. And then I think beyond that, counties need to do that, because I don't even think a governor knows what's going on or knows the best way to manage an economy 3 counties away from him. I think that should be up to the county officials to dictate that and to bolster that economy and to try different things and to get crazy and to, lower taxes like a radical. We don't want to say that evil word, lowering taxes, but to lower taxes. For all you Republicans out there, it's a notion that you take taxes and you make them smaller and you don't spend as much. I know Republicans, it's a crazy notion. We don't have to live under Keynesian economics all the time.
There's nothing more radical than wanting to live by the law of the land, the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah.
And there's only one unforgivable crime in America today, and that's standing up against the law.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Mark?
And the thing that grinds my gears the most is how many times a day do you hear somebody on television say, in a country as rich as this, or the alternative is in the richest country in the world, where we're just a third world beggar nation right now. We're riddled with debt and riddled with economic woes, and which are not going to be curable until the government just quits bleeding money and creating an unlimited supply of fiat money. And the concept is that as long as we're the world's reserve currency, we can always just keep printing more dollar bills to cover our debt. But as soon as we stop being the world's reserve currency, we just become one more third world debtor nation that's going to have to kowtow to the powers that be that control the world. By the way, the Chinese government is doing everything it can right now to replace us as a reserve currency.
Oh yeah, BRICS is on the move. They've got more people trying to sign up. Right now, I'd say we appear as rich as that private who just brought that brand new Camaro off the lot. He had to get 3 co-signers, and that loan is a beast, and he's gonna have to pawn his stuff every 15th. But he just bought a brand new Camaro.
Yeah,
and that's how rich we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on, Mark. This is. I hope for the sake of Missouri, and I hope for the sake of the nation, because we need strong senators in there. We have Senator Mike Lee. He's proven to be an excellent senator. He's really held the line, even amongst some pretty brazenly BS news that CNN and MSNBC puts out every time he demands that they say, hey, he wants to put forth a vote that if they bring a bill up, he wants to be able to read it before he votes on it.
How about that for a concept?
It's pure insanity, really, when you boil down to it. But he does things like that, and so he gets harassed by that, and we've been pretty lucky. And it'd sure be nice if we got a few more states to send forth senators to join him in his, I guess, I don't know whether you call it the Freedom Caucus or whatever, but if we could send forth a few more people to join him in his, battle.
Yeah, absolutely. And every day people ask me, what good would it do to elect you to the Senate? What's one more conservative senator going to do? And I always say the same answer. That is, if you elect me to the Senate, you'll get people like me and Rand Paul and Mike Lee and Ron Johnson and John Kennedy and not so much Ted Cruz anymore.
Yeah.
But we'll never make up even a majority of the Republicans in the Senate what we can do is make up the majority of the voices that the American people hear. And that we can constantly try to wake people up and convince them that they have a personal duty to take back our freedom and make this country free again.
Yeah. Yeah. Bolster the people in there that, I don't know. We need to return to something. We're heading off the rails. Every day it's a fight not to get black-pilled about where we're headed.
Yeah. So, and I've been saying this from the Trump campaign until today. This is the last opportunity we're going to have to pull back our freedom. If, for example, the quote voting rights bill which was HR 1, now it's the John Lewis voter rights bill, or whatever the heck they call it. If that passes, we're one vote away in the Senate from having that be the law.
Wow.
There'll never be another free election in this country.
Is John Lewis that guy down in Georgia?
He's currently deceased.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who's that senator down in Georgia who thought Guam was going to tip over from all the Marines?
Hank Johnson.
That guy's he votes on your well-being.
Yeah.
Who thought asked about how big it was, approximately 7 miles wide, 10 miles long. Well, with all those Marines on it, might it capsize?
I'm reminded of an Irish legislator taking a tour of a hydroelectric plant. Being Irish, I can tell Irish jokes. And he goes down, he sees the turbines, and he sees the electric cables coming out. And he says, "My God, man, you don't mean to serve your people water after you've taken all the electricity out of it."
Oh, man, that's like going back to Polish jokes. Oh, man. All right. So this is going to be the part where you're going to, if you go poll this, you're going to cut this. This will be your little commercial you throw up everywhere. Just give a 3-minute to the people who have the opportunity to vote for you.
All right. Well, this is, as I say every day, this is the last opportunity to save our country. If you really believe in this republic, if you really believe that this is a country where we are governed by the people, then this is the last opportunity to save it. I've never been a politician. I've never been a candidate for anything. I've spent my life representing the rights of individuals who couldn't afford to hire a lawyer out of their own pocket. I've always been a contingent fee attorney. I've become a candidate now for the United States Senate because our country is so close to absolute destruction. Our freedoms are so close to being lost forever. If you want to send a message to the world that this really is a free country, that the people really can pull back that consent to the governed and send somebody who's a true independent to DC, that has no lobbyists, has no billionaires, has no political consultants pulling the strings, then everybody needs to get out on August the 2nd and vote for me, because I'm going to go to DC. I'm going to kick some rhino butt. I'm going to tell the truth about what's going on in this country. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to allow things like unconstitutional mandates to go by without making everybody I can stand up and scream about it. We're not going to be a country that holds political prisoners. We're not going to be a country with a disinformation governance board. We're going to have a country where the Constitution is the law of the land, and the limits on the power of the federal government and the 10th Amendment will be upheld, that all the powers not specifically delegated to the federal government will be reserved to the states and to the people. And if that's what you want, if you think there's some value in freedom, if you think there's some reason to avoid tyranny, then I'm your best hope in the state of Missouri. And anywhere else in this country that's hearing this, if you've got candidates out there that will really stand up for your freedom, this is our last opportunity to do it. We all have to stand up together, and I always say the same thing: to resist, do not comply, stand up as a free people, people who are proud to kneel when we pray and stand for the American flag. And by the way, my website is McCloskey4Senate.com, McCloskeyFor, McCloskey4Senate.com. At this point in the game, I'm not asking you for money. I'm just asking you for your support to get out there, talk to your relatives, talk to your friends, spread the word, and get out there and vote on August the 2nd. My opponents are all funded by billionaires. They're going to have lots of TV commercials. You should be insulted every time you see a TV commercial, because what that TV commercial represents is some billionaire trying to put somebody they own into office by confusing you into voting for them. And every TV commercial is just a billionaire's way of coming between you and your freedom.
Yeah. Now, is that McCloskey? Is it FOR or the number 4?
FOR, McCloskey for Senate.com.
All right. I'm going to make sure that's in the show notes. Mark, thank you very much. And if you ever have another message you want to get out or any updates you want to share, feel free to reach out to either me or Dave. We'll have you on whatever time you need. This has been a good chat. And, man, it's good to have a voice that's going to cut through the BS and talk about what the real dangers and hazards we have right now.
Well, I appreciate you giving me the time. Long format interviews rare these days. When I go to the typical function, we get 3 to 5 minutes, and you really can't talk about a lifetime of the left trying to destroy our freedom in 3 to 5 minutes.
What do you mean trying?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Succeeding.
Yeah.
We've got to talk about the erosion. I used to talk about the erosion of our civil liberties, but it's just a wholesale slaughter now.
Oh yeah, where the Sphinx's nose, it's gone.
Yeah,
we've got to fight to get it back. I mean, we've got to seriously fight to get it back.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, Tim, you got
thanks
anything?
a lot, guys, for having me on.
Well, thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much. Anytime, just reach out, and we will hopefully chat with you again real soon. Hopefully on great terms. You say, yeah, Supreme Court gave us our firearm back, and everything's done. Matter of fact, they even paid us back all our legal fees.
Yeah. And I'm going to hold my breath on that one. I think we'll get the guns back with the attorney's fees. Yeah, I'm not too sure.
Yeah. All right. You have a good one, sir.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.